Is it worth learning Chinese characters? My short answer to this question is absolutely yes, because I think the benefits go beyond just being able to communicate in China or to do business there. So if you're interested in this, keep watching. And before moving ahead with this topic, please hit the subscribe and like buttons to help the channel and to be notified when new videos come online. Chinese characters are sometimes described as one of the main obstacles in learning Chinese, as the main thing that makes learning Chinese so difficult. And because of this, some learners of Chinese are trying to avoid them altogether and to study in full pinyin mode. They get textbooks written entirely in pinyin and even try to read books written in pinyin only. I really think these pinyin cowboys are not doing themselves a favor and are refusing to have a taste of the best part of the cake. Of course, I understand their point because there are so many Chinese characters and you need so many just to be able to read on a very rudimentary level. And some of the characters are actually quite complicated, so they're not easy to memorize. So on the surface, it may seem that by eliminating characters from the learning process, you will be so much better off, you will have reduced the noise. And so then you can focus on the core task of learning the language itself, and do it with much less effort. But let me assure you that when you're learning Chinese, Chinese characters are not noise. They are a crucial aspect of both language and culture in ways that you can appreciate only once you have started learning them. And in the end, it is questionable how efficient learning Chinese as a monotonous stream of pinyin is. Because you will not necessarily be learning much faster, you would still need to acquire the vocabulary and deal with the 4 tones. But at the same time, you will be missing out on a major part of Chinese culture and identity. Just imagine somebody who tried to learn English or French and refused to learn to read and write in these languages. And I don't mean somebody from other parts of Europe where they use the same alphabet, but someone who's not familiar with the Roman alphabet, or not familiar with any alphabet for that matter. And no matter how hard you reasoned on the benefits of the alphabet, they would be adamant that they had no need for it because, they would argue, it would hold them back. And if they managed to learn English like that, they would be able to function on a preschool level. And they would always have to rely on someone in daily life who could read for them. So in the supermarket, they would be like, "Hey, would you mind reading this label for me? Oh, it says milk. Great, thank you." Or, "Excuse me, what does this sign say here?" "Oh, it says no right turn." "Great, thank you." "And what is that sign over there?" "Oh, that says don't feed the pigeons." It would be ridiculous, unimaginable. Especially since in China, most of the signs have Chinese characters. It's a very text-based culture. They do have some Western-type signs, but most of the signs have Chinese characters in them. And this is because characters greatly simplify communication. They can convey a lot of information in relatively little space. So going full pinyin mode is definitely not the way to go. You cannot begin learning a language with the aspiration of one day reaching the level of being illiterate. In the modern world, as an adult, you also need to be able to read and write. There's no way around it. On a more conceptual level, I think learning Chinese characters is one of the most exciting aspects of learning Chinese. They're a completely different type of script from what we are accustomed to. And because they're so different, they have the potential of changing the way you think about writing in general, how writing functions vis-a-vis spoken language. So just by learning them, you kind of expand your horizon. And I'm not talking here about the 2 sides of the brain Chinese characters supposedly activate or use, which may not even be true, but of you discovering different mental patterns of how language and speech work in practice, challenging notions that you have kind of taken for granted, taken to be universal, and now you realize that they were only one possibility. I think learning Chinese characters is one of the major benefits of learning Chinese, or Japanese for that matter. They give you access to a world that was hidden from you. They open up a secret staircase that leads into an unknown dimension, an entirely new rabbit hole. You realize that it's possible to write down words not only phonetically, letter by letter, sound by sound, but also using largely non-phonetic signs that are associated with the word through convention. Which means that at one point everybody had to agree that this particular sign would represent the word mountain. And so you learn that there are other ways of writing down words, and that this might be true even for your own culture, because even there you don't really read words according to how they're spelled, especially in English where the spelling seems to be removed from how the word is actually pronounced. But to some extent you handle them in chunks, and to be able to read a word you need to recognize it in its entirety, without each time having to work out its pronunciation from how it's spelled. To put it differently, even in English, you don't actually read letters, you read entire words or phrases. Which is of course entirely natural, because when you see a rabbit, you don't look at it bit by bit starting from the tail and moving up to its ears, but you look at the animal and recognize it with one glance as a whole. And I think there's great value in this kind of perspective to be able to see familiar things from an entirely new angle, and to recognize the similarities in seemingly different systems and phenomena. This adds richness and depth to your thinking and makes you question some of the basic assumptions about your own culture and language. But there is no reason to deny there are of course also very tangible benefits for learning Chinese characters, like the ability of being able to read Chinese. And that means anything from boarding passes and customs declarations to novels and social media posts, from street signs and restaurant menus to lyrics and subtitles under movies. And if you want to go a step further, you can begin your descent into the depth of Chinese history and tap into this incredibly rich world of text written with Chinese characters, produced over the course of millennia. It is an endless pursuit, and you can go as far as you want to go. Just as importantly, Chinese characters are not limited to China. They have been used throughout East Asia, in countries such as Japan, Vietnam, and Korea, and in some other regions of Asia as well. Much of the Buddhist heritage of East Asia is written in Chinese characters, regardless of the actual country, even in places where Chinese dynasties had never had actual control. Which is why even today, Japanese people recite Buddhist sutras written in Chinese characters, using the Chinese reading of those characters. Of course, at the same time, teenagers in large cities such as Tokyo or Osaka also read manga partially written in Chinese characters, and also with kana scripts, which ultimately also derive from Chinese characters. But you can see Chinese characters in any area of life in Japan, whether in McDonald's restaurants or traditional bathhouses. And although Korea is becoming less and less dependent on Chinese characters, characters are present in pretty much all areas of their traditional culture, from religion to art to literature. So in sum, I think learning Chinese characters is a life-changing experience. They grant you access to an incredibly rich world, much of which is invisible to you beforehand. In any case, I would love to hear about your experience with learning Chinese characters, and how they've changed your perception about languages and the world in general. Hope this was useful, thank you for watching, and see you next time.